nation's former top lawman Alberto Gonzales has been asked whether he's afraid he could be in legal jeopardy right now. He would not answer, but in our fourth story tonight, as if he does fear he is in legal jeopardy, Mr. Gonzales tried to blame the Justice Department for authorizing torture. Not when he was in charge of that Justice Department. No. Before that, Gonzales was asked whether he was involved in any of the DOJ legal advice authorizing torture while he was still White House counsel. Quote, "What I can say is that I worked with the Department of Justice ensuring that legal advice was provided. But at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the Department of Justice to provide the legal guides on behalf of the executive branch." But at the beginning of the day, it was the executive branch, him specifically, who told the DOJ to authorize the torture. On January 22nd, 2002, Assistant Attorney General Jay Bybee wrote a memo declaring the Geneva Convention null and void. This was not Bybee's idea. The memo was addressed to White House counsel Alberto Gonzales, and it begins, quote, "You have asked for our office's views concerning the effect of international treaties and federal laws on the treatment of individuals detained by the U.S. 3 days later, Mr. Gonzales agreed with that memo in a memo of his own to the president. And the notorious so-called first Bybee memo of August of that year, defining torture down, was also addressed to White House counsel Alberto Gonzales. It begins, quote, "You have asked for our office's views regarding the standards of conduct under the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment or Punishment." That seminal memo redefining torture was prepared less than a week after Bybee consulted on the issue with Alberto Gonzales. According to Condoleezza Rice, the DOJ's legal advice, quote, was being coordinated by the counsel to the president, Alberto Gonzales. And when the CIA tortured Abu Zubaydah even before the DOJ authorized it, according to a report from NPR last week, the CIA got its permission directly from the White House, each time in almost daily emails from Alberto Gonzales. Let's turn now to Chris Hayes, Washington editor for The Nation magazine. Chris, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Keith.
What does it say when the question is whether he fears he is in legal jeopardy and the top-notch, burnished legal mind of Alberto Gonzales chooses not to deny it?
Well, I thought it was interesting that he didn't go out of his way to deny it. And I think it shows that, I mean, one of the things that's satisfying in some respect about the interview with Gonzales is it shows there is some wariness there. There is some conception that they aren't just going to kind of get off scot-free. Now, whether that means they're going to be dragged before Congress or there's going to be some sort of independent body that's commissioned, I think what you're seeing from Gonzales is the first time you've seen kind of this crack in the wall solidarity that has come out of the former Bush officials associated with the policy.
Well, how far do you think that crack goes? Because as these various congressional probes go on and more documents are released, how much of a chance is there that Gonzales actually does, in the more colloquial use of the term, crack? I mean, does he start throwing out blame against David Addington, Cheney's counsel, or Cheney himself in an effort to save himself?
Well, you wonder. I mean, one of the reasons that I think some kind of sustained inquiry is necessary is precisely because as long as there isn't one, we won't know what the principals know. And it's totally possible that under those conditions and under oath, and when people make their own computations of their self-interest and they think, I don't necessarily I don't want to be the one to sort of be in the ditch for this policy that I was kind of implementing but wasn't directing, that you might get to see people turn on each other and we might have a fuller airing of just exactly what went on. That really is the key thing.
Plus, if the Godfather is, in fact, some sort of biblical-like containment of prophecy regarding the Bush administration, it has to be Fredo. So, anyway,
That's right.
Back to reality. Describe and explain, if you would, the difference in the tone here between Mr. Gonzales and Mr. Cheney on the subject of defending torture.
Well, that's fascinating to me. I mean, the difference is the difference between Cheney, who is clearly one of the architects, if not the principal architect of the policy, and Gonzales, who was essentially a henchman, a lackey, someone who was doing what was directed by the Office of the Vice President and by David Addington, largely. I mean, if you believe the accounts most of the accounts that have come out about the kind of interplay and bureaucratic infighting in the office, that's the nature of it. And what you see is that he's not, unlike Cheney, who is completely unbowed, completely unapologetic, Gonzales seems far less willing to sort of brag about the role that he played in this whole thing. And I think that is at least some small silver lining that the policies that were implemented during that period haven't been so thoroughly normalized that he thinks that's the kind of thing that he could kind of leap to claim credit for.
But on the other hand, with him saying that these were the DOJ's responsibility, these opinions, to what extent is he sort of waving a red flag to the former DOJ lawyers, or even to John Ashcroft, who was the Attorney General who preceded him in that post, essentially daring them to reveal the true role of Alberto Gonzales in those opinions, kind of like the way we laid it out at the start of the segment here?
Right. It's unclear. I don't know how much thought he's given it. I think he's trying to throw it back less on Ashcroft and more on Bybee and John Yoo, who were the two people who were, I mean, it was Yoo who was basically writing the memos and Bybee putting his name on it. He's trying to throw it back in their direction, and they're the people that everybody has kind of associated with the policies because Bybee's name is on the memo and because Yoo has been so outspoken in both internal and accounts and since the administration ended. So I think he's just trying to direct people back in the direction of blame on these two names that have been floating around in press accounts.
But if every memo begins with you and it's YOU, not YOO, have asked for our office's views, that boomerang is going to hit Mr. Gonzales and not Mr. Bybee, one would think. In any event.
No, it's clear that it was emanating from the White House.
Chris Hayes of The Nation. Thank you, Chris.